Yes! Yes! We're finally able to share the news that Super Nintendo games are available to be played on the Nintendo Switch. Finally! These rumors have been brewing for, I don't know, since the beginning of the year, maybe even before that? It's been forever. Members of the Nintendo Switch Online service now have access to 20 Super Nintendo games to play in their original form, but with all the features that the NES games with the service also had, like online play, a rewind feature, and suspend points. To start off the service, we've got some pretty amazing titles from some mainline Nintendo franchises, and then some pretty oddball inclusions as well. So you might be curious, which games should you start with? Which games should you or I invest our time into? So that's where we come in to help. I'm Zian from Nintendo Life, and today we're bringing you our ranked list of the first 20 Super Nintendo games available on the Nintendo Switch. This list is of course going to be ranked from worst to best. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that any of these titles on the list are bad, we just only have 20 games to talk about at the moment, so if a game ends up in last place, it might still be worth playing if you're into the genre. And if you've already played the heck out of the Super Nintendo Classics library, well, fret not, because only 9 of the games from that made it over onto the Nintendo Switch, so there's plenty of new games to check out that you might not have tried before. But that's plenty of introduction. Let's take a look at the list.
Super EDF isn't really a bad game, it's just mostly a bland and uninspired shoot-'em-up. Fans of the genre might get a kick out of its unique weapon variations, but most shooter fans who are used to experiencing more top-shelf shoot-'em-ups of the era are likely to find Super EDF far too flawed to ever get the level of enjoyment needed to warrant the time investment. And if you're familiar with any of the more recent Earth Defense Force games, you'll quickly realize this is nothing like those at all. Breath of Fire is a history lesson on old school role-playing games that comes complete with hiccups and all. At a time where Square was putting out some of the best RPGs on the system, Capcom just wasn't able to develop an experience that would fully stand the test of time. A decent story bundled with some unique characters and some great atmosphere is unfortunately let down by dull combat, outdated menus, and a few good ideas that just don't go far enough. But with this being the only RPG available on the service currently, it's hard to recommend not giving it a go if you're a fan of the genre.
Now maybe if we're lucky, we'll see a re-release of Breath of Fire 2, because in my opinion, it is a much better game. It has a much more memorable story and a lot better cast of characters as well. And while the cover is pretty terrible, the Game Boy Advance port's cover is much better. A little bland, but the 90s. Am I right?
Super Soccer was one of the first soccer games to hit the Super Nintendo, and is also actually a localized port of Super Formation Soccer, which has seen several sequels after this entry. Using the Mode 7 effects of the console, the game presents a low-down, third-person view of the action, which can make it hard when running down the pitch towards the screen. While better soccer games exist on the Super Nintendo, Super Soccer will have a place in the hearts of many due to the fact that it was their first taste on the console. Even though this is Super Puyo Puyo 2's first Super Nintendo release in the West, it should need no introduction. The core puzzle gameplay elements have been set in stone for decades, and we've seen Puyo Puyo sequels on several Nintendo consoles, including the Nintendo Switch. While these mechanics have been enhanced and updated over the years, this early entry has a simplicity that makes it well worth a look, especially if you can rope in a second player locally or online. You might assume that making a successful side-scrolling fighter is as easy as falling off a log, but Jaleco's Super Nintendo-based efforts prove otherwise. Brawl Brothers seems to tick every box. It has a 2-player mode, 5 different fighters, and a respectable selection of moves to utilize. However, the execution is all wrong. The controls feel loose and floaty, and the hit detection requires enemies to be directly in front of you to register a connection. Aside from all this, Brawl Brothers commits possibly the most heinous crime of this type of game. It lacks any sort of imagination and flair, and that means that chugging through its uninspired levels is a largely thankless task that only hardcore fans of the genre should consider undertaking. We highly recommend checking out one of the numerous beat-em-ups already available on the eShop, if you can spare it. Confusingly known as Joe and Mac 3 Lost in the Tropics in Europe, Joe and Mac 2 is an oddball addition to the Nintendo Switch Online Super Nintendo lineup, but it's also a very likable 2D platformer, which allows 2 players to join in on the fun. Visually, it's certainly eye-catching, and improves on the original Joe and Mac Caveman Ninja and its sequel, Congo's Capers, in many ways. Not a stone-cold classic by any means, but still well worth a look if you're into action platformers. Kirby's Dream Course was the title that confused me the most of the lineup of games provided on the Super Nintendo Classic when it originally launched. And here it is again to confuse and surprise a brand new audience. Dream Course is best described as a mini golf game, and its control mechanics are surprisingly deep enough that battling through some of the courses can be a real challenge. And as a result, it should appeal to those with the right mindset, but should be avoided by anyone who thinks this is some sort of retro version of Wii Sports. Multiplayer battles can also offer a ton of fun, or a lot of frustration, depending on the patience and skill level of your playgroup. Simple to pick up and play, Pilot Wings is a lot of fun to work your way through. Activities are brief, but the difficulty is well judged, requiring you to master controlling the various modes of transport to proceed. Once cleared, there's not really much else to do, but the game provides some quick and easy fun whenever you feel like taking a break for a bit of aerial activity. Kirby's Dream Land 3 is a fairly standard but worthy entry within the Kirby series, improving and expanding just about every aspect of its handheld predecessors by giving it a delightful coat of paint and multiplayer support. What it lacks in compelling gameplay is made up for with buckets of charm, supported by a whole level of variety, perfect for short bursts of playtime with a friend or by yourself. And now, even though the Switch just received a free-to-start Kirby game, you can't really ever get sick of this little puffball, can you? Releasing shortly after Star Fox, Stunt Race FX was one of the first games on the Super Nintendo to utilize the FX chip. And as far as racers on the SNES go, it looks extremely impressive until you get it in your hands and realize how slow and difficult it is to control. Thankfully though, there is a great variety of well-constructed tracks to hold your interest if you can get things under control. Newcomers to this legendary SNES title could feel a bit put off by this platformer's hellish level of difficulty. However, giving up too early means you'll be missing out on one of the most accomplished platform adventures of the 90s. Super Ghouls and Ghosts is inventive, enthralling, gorgeous to look at, and a joy to listen to. With each level completed and each boss defeated, you feel like you're growing as a player, and surely that's something all video games should aspire to achieve. Now just try not to use the rewind feature too often. We know you're gonna want to, because, well, at least I did. F-Zero on the Super Nintendo might lack the embellishments of its N64 successor and could really benefit from a 2-player mode, but that doesn't necessarily take away from the overall experience. This is a classic racer, which has a level of purity and playability that rival titles have been struggling to emulate ever since. Tight controls, unforgettable music, and impeccable course design make F-Zero a joy to behold. And it also marks the first appearance of one of our favorite Super Smash Bros., Captain Falcon. Easily one of the best sports games on any console, Super Tennis is an utterly fantastic replication of the sport which, despite its cute visuals, is arguably more authentic than many modern takes on tennis. With 4 shot types to master and loads of little skills and tactics to learn, it has the kind of depth that only the very best sports sims can boast. A challenging campaign mode is also present, which, as you can see, I'm having an extremely hard time with. But its 2-player mode is more perhaps the star of the show. So if you're looking for someone to beat up in tennis, I guess I'm your guy. The release of Star Fox and its integration of the Super FX chip successfully set apart the Super Nintendo from the competition. Argonaut Software and Nintendo created a magical team for this project. The sparks flew from the screen in a genuine mix of European and Japanese talent, orally, visually, and in its character design and presentation. It was phenomenal in 1993 and will be rightly remembered as a classic. It's hard to find anything not to like about Demon's Crest, despite its difficulty. The ability to play the levels in different orders, not to mention the free-roaming feel of the game, make it feel like an RPG at times. The fact that it's also chock full of gameplay elements just further makes the title endearing and enjoyable. It's fairly safe to say that if you loved the Ghosts and Goblins franchise, you're going to love this spin-off. And even if you're not a big fan, you may find that the added playability of Demon's Crest might be enough to make a fan out of you. And personally, I'd like to see more rare and expensive titles on the Super Nintendo release on this service. If you try to go buy a physical copy of Demon's Crest online, at the time of recording this video, it'll set you back a solid $80. With controls, track design, and items meticulously structured, the mechanics sketched out the foundations of the franchise. Alongside a stern 150cc class and Special Cup challenge, cheap AI rivals can't dampen the ability to rocket start, hop, and power slide your way to a smooth, perfect lap run. 8 characters each with different handling types add replay value for approaching time trials, or 2-player GP and battle mode showdowns. Super Mario Kart propelled the series forward from the starting line as a pace setter, not only amongst karting games, but as a leader of the pack in the retro racing genre. Yoshi's Island isn't just a great platformer. It's one of the best games on the Super Nintendo. From the colorful world design to the lovable music, to the terrifying and ear-piercing screams of Baby Mario.
God, the thought of losing him still gives me nightmares.
And just like any Mario platformer, there's plenty to collect and a lot of challenge for anyone looking for it. We'd be surprised if anyone took a look at this game and didn't feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Super Metroid is a science fiction masterpiece that not only redefined everything that was great about the Metroid series at that point, it also helped pave the way for an entirely new genre of games, Metroidvanias.
Ah, yes! Yes, like this, right? Yeah, this is a Metroid game. No?
Its engrossing atmosphere, tight controls, pure exploration, and gnarly bosses are just a few of the things that make this an unforgettable experience from front to back. And like many of its Super Nintendo brethren, it honestly hasn't aged a day, which is a testament as to why the system is often regarded as one of the best home consoles of all time. This is the apex of 16-bit platforming, a cornerstone of the gaming canon, and most importantly, just as much fun to play today as it was all those years ago. If you've yet to experience the thrilling discovery of a secret exit, the joy of soaring through a level with your super cape, or the unique laughter of accidentally sprinting off a cliff while trying to catch up to a runaway Yoshi, you're in for some of gaming's best loved and most iconic moments. This is one of the best games of all time. Clear your weekend, call over a play or two, and enjoy. A Link to the Past is rightly considered a 16-bit classic and offers hours of engrossing entertainment and tantalizing challenge. Not many games from over 2 decades ago still feel as fresh and tightly constructed as this. It represents Nintendo at its very best. Everything is so focused and finely tuned that it's genuinely hard to see how it could possibly be improved upon. Link's Awakening was restricted by the limitations of the Game Boy, but A Link to the Past needs no refinement. What we have here isn't just one of the finest games in the Super Nintendo library, it's one of the most engaging and captivating classics in the history of video gaming.
And there you have it. 20 Super Nintendo games that you can play on your Nintendo Switch right now. Now, of course, we might not have gotten every Super Nintendo game that we could have ever wanted, but remember, this is just the beginning. Nintendo's promised to release more NES and Super Nintendo games as time goes on. They did say that the schedule is going to change a little bit. They're not going to release every month like they used to. They still could, but there's no promises on that. They're just going to get released as Nintendo feels like it. Unfortunately, there are probably some titles from the Super Nintendo that just won't make the cut, as they've already been released in other collections by their own companies, like the Collection of Mana series, or Castlevania Collection, or the Mega Man collections, for example. The titles from those collections we probably just won't see. Feel free to let us know in the comments down below which games you're most excited to play off the list so far. And feel free to let us know which games you'd like to see come to the service down the road. I personally am itching to get my hands on Donkey Kong Country 2 again, and I'm currently playing Earthbound on my 2DS via the Virtual Console, but it'd be really nice to get that on the Switch as well, because it would just open it up to such a broader audience of people that have never experienced that wonderful gem before. And that's something that's really special about the Switch, is giving people a new way to play these games is just a wonderful thing. If you enjoyed this video, then why don't you go ahead and breathe fire on that like button, subscribe to Nintendo Life, and ring that notification bell to be notified whenever we release new videos. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm Zion from Nintendo Life, and we'll see you next time. Yes, Felix always likes to bother me when I'm recording videos, doesn't he? Don't you? Yeah. He'll come paw at the door. And then he doesn't even want to hang out when I open it anyways. He just runs away, just rubs his head on the tripod, make the camera shake. You meow when I'm talking. It's okay. You don't know any better. Bye.